Hi, I'm Mack, and I'm on a mission to see the hurting get healed and the healed go out and heal others, in order for all of us to experience the true love and light we desire. This podcast is me sharing my journey with you, so you don't feel alone in your journey. Welcome to the Golden Rule Revolution. Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome to another episode of the Golden Rule Revolution. I'm Mack. Thank you for joining. And today I am so excited to bring my guest, Ryan Picarella, on the podcast. All of us, no matter where you are in the world, we've all gone through our own struggles, experienced our own traumas and pains. And thankfully, if you're listening to this podcast, I know that you're on the hero's journey to step into the fullness of your purpose and power, why you're here. And in this beautiful episode, we get to hear Ryan's story of his hero journey, and also something that I want to talk more about in the coming episodes and coming days and months and years of this podcast. I want to talk about the power of plant medicine, and with the intention and setting, being in the right place, how much it is helping so many people heal and just reclaim that sense of innocence and beauty and childlike wonder again, and that we all are yearning to find, whether we're aware of that or unaware of that. So I'm so excited to bring this episode. Ryan, thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for sharing your story. You're such a beautiful brother. I'm so glad we met, and everyone enjoy. Well, my brother Ryan, thank you, man. Thanks for coming on. Everyone, like I shared, Ryan and I got connected through someone that he works with, who I had a lovely conversation with, and just connected on that heart level. And then she's like, "You got to talk to Ryan." We synced up, and it was like, brother, like, where have you been this whole time? And so, bro, thank you for coming on the podcast and showing up like you do.
Oh man, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. And I know that, like, literally within the moment that we met, I was like, oh, of course, yeah. This is the beginning of a beautiful relationship. And I look forward to this and other great stuff that we'll figure out that we need to do in the world too. So Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
My pleasure, man. My pleasure. The one thing that's been coming up lately with many people I've been talking to is just the hero's journey, and everyone is somewhere along their own hero's journey in that Joseph Campbell cycle. And you have a tremendous story where you've come out of the cave, you come to the other side, you're still working through stuff. But for people who have yet to hear your story, share, your background, where you grew up professionally, what led you to what you're doing now.
Totally. So I'll try to be as succinct. So I live in Omaha, Nebraska now. Now we'll kind of back up. But I grew up, and I think part of my journey was growing up with a disabled mother, and what that was like. And that was very eye-opening, I think, for me at a very, very early age, and bubbled up a bunch of stuff. And I grew up most of my life in Georgia, did a stint in St. Louis for a while, which is where both my parents are from, ended up back in Georgia. And like most kids getting out of high school, I wanted to go far away. So I remember as a kid, my parents, we did the Griswold family trip and vanned it across the country. And I remember seeing the Grand Canyon for the first time. Gosh, I was probably in second or third grade. And just left a deep imprint on my soul. And I was like, I felt like I was home. I was like, this is my church. This is even at a very, young age. And so when I had the opportunity to go to college, I remember I applied to Northern Arizona University. Never really seen the school before, didn't care, knew that it was close to the Grand Canyon. And honestly, that's all that mattered. I had no idea what I wanted to go to school for. Ended up there and studying anthropology. And really that became, a passion. I had an amazing small group of us, mostly, indigenous folks from the area and from other parts of the country and really the world. We had a few people from Japan, from Mexico, and other kind of First Nations people from South and Central America. And was my love. And as I mentioned, my mom was sick, ended up leaving college, going back home to be closer to her, ended up back in Georgia again, and ultimately in Tennessee. And somehow I, again, just at one of those crossroads in life, was like, what do I do with myself? And thought I'd go back to school, and found myself in an industrial organizational psychology program. And at the time, I think I've shared, I had no idea what the I or the O stood for, but knew I didn't want to do research. They had no anthropology. And I was like, well, hell, I'll just do this. And started my journey in HR. And it's funny because I don't think anybody grows up and says, I want to be an HR professional when I get out of school. And it's not a knock, and I love it, and it's, you become the caretakers of your organization. And so that was where, it kind of began. But I started the corporate track, and it was a good ride. And I think I had aggressive goals as to what I wanted to do. And I was at a large health carrier for 10 years, ended up on a whim at the nudging of a good friend of mine, applying for a CEO position at the Wellness Council of America. After several attempts, he said, man, like, why wouldn't you apply? And I said, I don't know. I said, I don't think I'm qualified. I don't think I'll get the job. And I remember Sean is his name. And Sean said, well, if you got the job, would you take it? And I said, yeah. And he said, if you didn't get the job, you still have the job you have, right? And I was like, yes. And so that was the beginning. Ended up there. And I was the CEO of Alcoa for almost 8 years. And then went through this sort of pivotal, sort of transformation. I think this is where we're kind of leading to. And I hit 40. And I don't know what happens when we hit 40. But I remember standing in my backyard and looking around, and by all standards had all the things that we, aspire to get, beautiful home, beautiful family, suburban neighborhood, green grass, cute dog. But I was not happy, and I couldn't figure out what was going on in my life and why I wasn't happy. And so that was sort of the beginning of the burn it down and build it back kind of approach. And I don't necessarily recommend it if there's other paths that are less, that was sort of thing. And so, I ended up, leaving the job and leaving the family, and, as bought a small camper and decided to disappear for about 7 months, and to really sort of hit a hard reset on my life, and to figure out what the hell had happened and where do I most importantly decide to go from here. So I'll dive more into that, but I'll kind of take a pause there. But that's been the journey, and that was about 3 years ago when that sort of began.
Wow, amazing. The anthropology side, tell me about that. Like, what drew you early on? Because I took anthropology. I have actually a funny story about the anthropology building at University of Washington I'll share in a sec. But what drew you into that?
It has been like, I believe I have a spirit, guide, whatever you want, a guardian angel, whatever. From a very early age, I've just been really drawn. And even my mother, as kids, would take us to, when I lived in Georgia, we'd go up and spend a lot of time in Cherokee lands and others. And so there's always been this like deep soul connection to it. And I don't know what it is. I think there's a wisdom. And I remember my first anthropology teacher said, is that, this is the study of similarities, not differences. And I always kind of took that we as humans, like, we all really truly at the core desire and want the same things. We want to love, we want to be loved, we want to laugh, we want to play, we want to be creative, we want to explore. It's like these, sort of cultural universals, as they're known, was just always a fascination to me. And it's like, in culture really defines everything, right? It defines what's normal, what's not normal, what our values are, what they're not, how we interact with each other, what is the right way to sort of be and exist within the land, the place that we're in, within the people that we operate, how the systems that are created. And it's always been interesting. And then there's all these microcosms that were fascinating, right? Like, even with companies, like, you can have the same company in different cultures and different offices. And I was like, this is interesting. Why? Like, why is it? And so it's just like that inquisitiveness. And I think just how do we get people back to the true north, right? And to create healthy systems of people. And I think we did it right. There was so much more harmony I think with a lot of the indigenous, cultures, then I think that where we're at today, there's a lot of wisdom that we could probably should probably be listening and heeding as we move into this transformational sort of time period that we're in.
Yeah. Amazing. It's amazing. Such a fascinating time. Have you seen the show Yellowstone?
I have not. I've heard of it. It's definitely on my list. Do you recommend it?
I really recommend it. I really do. But it shows the two clashes of cultures of the Western settler and the native tribes. And at one time, the coexistence and the kindness, and then things shift and change. And it's an interesting dynamic because I'm drawn to the ancient wisdom of any culture, even the Hermetic school. To find whatever I can get. And at the end of the day, we're walking over wisdom. We just don't even that's why anthropology is so fascinating to me, to dig it out and to expose ancient wisdom beneath our feet.
I think one of my biggest learnings over the last couple of years for me, and through a variety of healing practices, whether it be plant medicine, whether it be other things, whether it's meditation, whether it's deep reflection, whether it's through music, but like I've been setting the wrong goals in my life. Mm-hmm. And I think that like trying to understand like what is it that, like, where do these desires, and I think they're driven by ego. It could be money centric. It could be this, it could be whatever. Like, we're conditioned in a lot of ways, again, through culture and upbringing. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes like that go against the grain of who we are in spirit. Mm-hmm. And then we find ourselves in this conundrum that we thought we wanted these things. And again, it could be the nice cars, it could be material things, it could be the big house, it could be whatever. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, shit, that's not feeding the soul. And then we have to say, well, if that's not feeding the soul, then what will? And how do we get back to that? And I think just, through some of the ancient wisdom, like they were good at that. It was balance. I'm a big, sort of balance, whether it's masculine, energy and feminine energy. Like there's always got to be, the light and the dark, the yin and the yang, whatever. Like, how do we begin to really, and I think so many of us find ourselves out of balance. I think our country is out of balance. I mean, how do we bring that? And I think that there's learnings through the ancient wisdoms that we need to sort of pause and reflect on, and hopefully bring out some transformation, both like starts here, right? Ourselves. And then we can bring that out to hopefully to others and those that we love in our communities, our companies, whoever.
I love that. Dude, I have you just reminded me, I'm going to have to send this clip. So there was this, very expensive condo tower built in Bellevue, where we were living, which is where Expedia's headquarters, Microsoft, Amazon, like all these elite executives were living in this condo, this brand new high-rise tower. And my buddy lived in it. And he invited me to the gym he was one of the first people that lived in this high-rise. So there weren't that many tenants. And we're sitting in the sauna, and this must have been like late 80s, old Asian man comes in, and we're just laying in the sauna, just not talking. And he looks at us, and he looks at me, and he looks at the other guy, and I'm like, kind of acknowledge him. And he goes, balance. I go, what? He goes, balance. Everything is balance. And he goes on a diatribe in the sauna where I'm just like soaking in sweat, talking about balance. And it was when, similar to you, like it was my before you're 40, it was my 34, like I was out of balance massively. And he's telling me about balance, and my buddy still will text me once in a while, like, balance. I said, how'd that guy get in? There was he checked. The guy wasn't a tenant. No one knows how he got in. We could have hallucinated this ancient sage, but this man went on to tell us all about balance. And I've never forgotten this concept of balance. And you're talking about like, we're out of balance right now. Our society, our culture, like media, everything is out of balance. And to come back and find that balance is perhaps the greatest gift we could bless everyone with right now. It's just, how do we get there? And I want to hear how you are getting there. But real quick, I want to tell the story about anthropology building at the University of Washington. So I lived off campus my junior and senior year, and I'd park like 2 or 3 miles away on this one street where they had free parking, and I walk into class every day. The last building on campus was the anthropology building, and I'd go to the bathroom in this one stall if I had to. And on the stall, someone wrote, "God is dead, Nietzsche." And I'd seen this quote for, I don't know, a year and a half. The last week I was in school before I graduated, used the stall, and I look, and it still said "God is dead, Nietzsche," but underneath it, someone wrote, "Nietzsche is dead, God." It made me laugh. I thought, God, the wisdom in these stalls, you never know what you're going to find. But I thought that was and Nietzsche wasn't saying that God is dead as like the concept of God. He's saying that they culturally killed the concept of God in the Weimar Republic. And it was a observational statement on the time. However, I've never forgotten that concept of like, that's balance also.
Right.
This huge concept. And then the underlying, like, well, Nietzsche's dead now too, God. It's funny. Like everything becomes somewhat humorous when we can find the balance in everything. And I don't know how this ties into what you're saying, but it feels like there's some profound something there.
So I think it's a perfect example, right? You have this very, this revered philosopher, and then you've got the humor in it, right? Like, don't take it too seriously. Like,
that's right.
Right? Like, it's
awesome. It's awesome.
As deep as you want to, but sometimes, like, having that inner 3-year-old and you laugh at dumb stuff is an important part of like
that's right.
Balance. And I think I've told you part of my healing. So when I June of 2020. We're 3 months into the pandemic. Like, we're still trying to figure out, the world's getting super weird. And that was what was also weird, is that it was the world, right? I mean, I have friends out globally, and every country's kind of handling it differently, but we're all deep into this COVID thing. And we're trying to figure out like what's next. We didn't even know what next week was going to be like. And, it was wild. And, fortunately, I would say I had 2 at the time, like incredible healers. The first is, I have a friend. He's an incredible coach, an incredible human, and has got an amazing story that would be great for your podcast at some point. But he said, man, he's like, come to the desert of California. He's like, I'm hosting a retreat in June. He's like, we'll be doing some plant medicine, and I was like, you don't want me there. I was like, I'm a freaking disaster right now. I was like, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, I don't think anybody wants me to be around them. I am not fun. I was out of balance. I was bad. I was I was broken, like you could probably, pass gas and I might just cry because I wouldn't know what else to do. You know what I mean? Like, I just was that. I was at the end, man. I mean, I really think like that was like, I was in a dark place, and he's like, just get here, get here. So I did, and had the opportunity to spend a couple days, out of the mountains in the desert. And I remember like, there was this moment where like I was journaling, and I love to write, and this thing kept coming back like on paper, and it's like, welcome back. And I was like, what does that even mean? It's like, welcome back. Like, where the fuck have you been? And I'm sorry if I cuss. Like, that was okay. It's like, you've gotten so far away from yourself that now is the beginning to come back, like to embrace yourself, all parts of you, the broken parts, the good parts, the bad parts. And that was the beginning. And I literally got back. I bought a camper a week later, and at the time my girls were like 3, just turned 3. Wow. And I took my 3-year-old daughters, and we went camping for 6 months back and forth. And my sister had terminal cancer at the time, and it was just trying to be there for her. But my daughters, speaking of funny, and seeing life through the lens of, at the time, a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, was honestly, if it wasn't for them, I don't know that I would be sitting here talking to you and smiling about the story. And it was like, okay, what's important? How do we giggling and laughing and playing and catching fireflies and staring at a fire with a stick, for hours. How fun is that? And it's you forget these things. They're almost like these primal, things that are deep rooted. And it was like, this is what really actually matters. Nothing else. Getting away from some of the social media, getting away from whatever, sort of toxic energy is not, helping you, realize that. And so that was that they were the healers. The two little ones I would watch and be mesmerized by, seeing the world through the first time and so many first experiences. And it was a reminder to me to let that childlike sort of Ryan out again. And I think we repress this. we don't want to be that, anymore. And we try to be things. And that was, where I thought, I was like, I'm like 15 different people right now. I've lost track.
Yeah.
So,
Did having a mom that was, you said sick, but then you said your mom was disabled. What was she struggling with, or what did she live with?
It was a long, kind of a slow, sort of stick with her. She had a tumor in her neck when I was very young, and it was at the base of her spine, and they couldn't get it all out. And so they did radiation, and they had to do surgery, and then she had a stroke on an operation table. So it was like one surgery kind of do another, and over the next like 20 years, just slowly became more disabled, less able to, over time. And the thing that was, kind of gratitude. I know we all talk about gratitude, but holy cow, this woman would always look around in a room and always sort of have the mentality that there's always somebody worse off than me. She was always lucky, and she was always like, I'm so blessed, for this. Every time I was like, holy cow, like, that's pretty wild to be able to take that. And I think, that little lesson, and even something that I've tried to instill with my girl every night, whether you pray, whether you're, whatever your thing is like, what were you grateful for today, Lucas? Yeah. Like, I don't care how shitty your day was, but like, give me two things. And that's kind of the conversation without the shitty with my girls. I'm like, all right, I know school is hard. Someone was mean to you, but give me two things that you're happy for today. And it's like, them, it's just easy, it's like, oh, well, I'm eating,
Yeah. It's funny. I asked my 6-year-old that I took him to, tomorrow's her last day of school, and I took him to donuts. There's this donut place they love, and they all got a special donut this morning. And I asked him, what are you grateful for this morning? And my third, she used to be my youngest, but now she's not. But anyway, my 6-year-old, I go, what are you grateful for? She goes, my life. And I'm like, wow, my life, a 6-year-old grateful for her life. That's amazing.
That is amazing. And I'll tell you, my daughter wrote something, she was drawing, and she said, she was writing, she goes, I love myself. I was like, also amazing, right? Like, these are the little nuggets that our little nuggets are, yes. It's like, I love myself. I'm like, that's really profound. And I hope that, like, because so many of us get to the point, and I think I was there, like, we don't love ourselves.
Right.
And whatever gets in the way, like, it becomes cloudy. And if we can't love ourselves, then we certainly aren't going to be in any position to really, truly, and authentically love others and those around us, and really sort of have that be. But yeah, that's awesome, man. And like, those are the stories I'm like, wow, like that one's going on the fridge.
Yeah, seriously, totally. It's interesting too, this whole concept of the childlike, like you observed. Like, I was a mess. I was a mess before I had my breakdown, rebuilding. Like hurting, struggling, like unhappy, unsatisfied. Success externally didn't match like my need to like validate myself or find some sort of like resting point. And I started looking the past, like even a couple of years, I've just been breaking down language set. Like you were talking about. Like, I really believe nature is consistent because nature speaks the consistent language set. Like a cow moos. It doesn't all of a sudden try to speak, donkey or something. Like, it just moves. And the consistency of language keeps nature consistent. But humans are like all over the place. Like, words change meanings, and we're all trying to like, wait, what is going on here? And it's this never settled experience because the language is changing. And I have this painting, someone was listening and sent me this painting, a friend of mine, and it's in that sun, it says heaven is a balanced heart, because I was talking about the word heaven is a conjunction word. It's heart and even heaven. And Jesus says, unless you become like a little child, you may not enter the kingdom of heaven. So unless we like go back and heal, I think this materialistic world, and there's this quote I heard the other day. This guy's uncle is a Presbyterian minister somewhere in Illinois. And he said this quote, and I'm like, that is deep. He said, materialism cannot bear the burden placed upon it. Like, this materialistic world just can't. We're looking for meaning, love, joy, acceptance, sense of belonging. Materialism just cannot bear that burden. It cannot satiate this need. And it's like, Well, heaven, an even heart, a balanced heart, takes childlike wonder to go back and like,
Right.
so it's cool to hear what you're saying. I'm like feeling this experience again. It's like
It's a disease. Like I refer to it as moreism, right? Like there's moreism. Like we need more. That whether it's money, whether it's power, whether it's and I was just thinking as you're talking, like it's like we get to a point. This is like where we're programmed, right? And then we've got to like figure out how do we deprogram ourselves actually.
Yes.
So to like back to baseline a little bit that we've just so long, and it's not an easy journey. That's the thing. I mean, there's whether it's society or family or both or all these things and this, upbringings that's like, oh my goodness, like we actually have to shed. I'm a huge reptile fan. I've grown up with snakes my entire life. We have Koa the boa. My girls love reptiles, but I'm always fascinated with like they shed their skin, the ability to continuously shed the skin. Like we have to like let ourselves shed. And I keep going back. I was like, there's this, again, taking psychology, anthropology, like this whole idea of ego, and ego, that's a whole, rabbit trail we could go down, but it's like, I think it gets in the way of ourselves, so much. And I've also like expectations of ourselves. I don't know where a lot of like, sometimes those might be self-given that we have this impression that we need to do great things, and great things translate into, X, Y, and D, or back to moreism, or this, that, and the other. Or the other thing is that if we don't meet our own expectations, then we might feel shame and guilt, or we feel like we've not, whether that's something that we're not meeting the bar that our parents set for us, or that we set for ourselves, or that somebody else, or that a spouse or a partner or nobody. Feel like it's just, that's the skin. Like that's the skin that I think, and there's so many paths like to be able to shed some of that. And I think, there's not, what I've learned is, you and I know have shared some amazing experiences with plant medicine. And I know that like, I wouldn't be the same human without some of those. Right. And part of that, as you know, is the community that you meet in those particular environments. It's everything. It's not one, because it's fascinating. I've heard people try to take the plant medicine out of the environment, and do it on their own. They're in their bedroom, jamming to Pink Floyd. And they're like, oh, I'm going to do this. And that's not the same.
Yep. That's definitely not the same.
as you know. And so like, I don't know. There's just multiple paths to, various levels. A good friend of mine wrote a book called Life on Purpose. His name is Vic Strecker, and his daughter, her name is Julia, passed away. It's probably been 9 years. And Vic is really interesting. He's a professor at the University of Michigan, sort of left, again, in his sort of rebuilding, read all these ancient texts, Nietzsche, Aristotle, Marcus Aurelius, Pluto, Socrates, you name them, the Bible, the Quran, like all these, like, give me the wisdom, right? Give me the wisdom, the timeless wisdom. And his, sort of interpretation of all of this was, well, it's simple. Purpose, meaning and purpose. Like, what is it? How do we fuel and find and connect with our sense of purpose, our meaning? And if we don't, and if we can't, we either have to work on it, or else, we'll be sick. It'll manifest itself into, it could be substance abuse, it could be overeating, it could be depression, it could be, unhealthy behaviors, relationships, whatever. If we lack that deep connection. His path to healing and growth was different than maybe you and I's, but it's the same, it's back to kind of the Joseph Campbell, it's a hero's journey, right? And it's different for everybody. And last thing I'll say, because I know, like, we hear this a lot during some of these ceremonies, sometimes it's not what you expect or what you wanted, but it's always what you needed.
Yeah, always. Yes. 100%. Like I was just sharing with Ryan before we started recording. I went to this ayahuasca ceremony about 3 weeks ago, and my intention was to heal the mother wound. I thought my expectation was there's going to be a lot of females there at the ceremony, and the feminine energy would be able to hold space for me to heal this wound. And yet it was the complete opposite. It was all these powerful, like very powerful men with no egos standing there holding me while I'm really processing deep shame of what happened to me. And these men saying there's no shame in that. There's no shame in that. And I'm like, man, a woman couldn't have told me that. She could have told me that, or she could say that, but it was not what I wanted. It's what I needed is what I'm saying. Like it has always been that way. And, plant medicine is such a fascinating, it's such a fascinating topic because there's so many different perspectives on it. Like even people have never done it and they judge it, or there's this concept of like, I was a prolific judger. I was one of the most prolific stone throwers before 2016 that you had ever met. Like I was a verbal assassin. I was judgy. I was ruthless. I was ruthless with my words. I was ruthless with my employees. I thought I was building culture, but I was like, work harder, grind it out. Don't tell me what you can't do. Tell me what you can do and do it mentality. It was horrible. And I had never done any substance other than alcohol and not even cannabis or anything in my life until 38 years old, 39 years old, going to an ayahuasca ceremony, and a buddy is a Navy SEAL who healed massive deep PTSD trauma was like, you should come do this. And I was like, I don't know. Like, what does that mean about me? Am I a drug? Is this a drug? And all I can share with everyone listening is you got to listen if you're called to it. It's not something it's like anything. Not everyone should drive. Not everyone should have sugar. Not everyone should have, it's a personal thing. But I will say that the ancient world lived with the plants.
Yes.
And they found a rabbi's remains in Israel. Some archaeologists just uncovered it last year. If I can find the article, I'll post it in the show notes. And they found remains of a rabbi with a satchel. And in the satchel were the 11 spices of the temple. And one of the spices was cannabis. And what the Catholic Church has done when they do the incense, which now it's nothing, but it's what the priest of the temple would do. They would bring this incense of all these plants. And so when people were in prayer, it actually was a relationship with the plants and the God who created the plants and themselves all working together in this consciousness. And we're so far gone from understanding the relationship between plant, nature, and our balance in this whole life.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We attach meaning to things, right? And then that's not always right. Like you attached a meaning to what that was, or the type of people maybe that did those things, or whatever, and like it became bad. And it's funny. I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine, and we were talking about tobacco. And you say tobacco, right? And it's bad. It gives you cancer, smoking cigarettes, chew, we have created, an enemy out of tobacco. And I don't use tobacco, so this isn't coming from a place at all, but it was more around like it was used in a lot of traditional, ways. And it, there wasn't a problem with, lung cancer amongst the early natives using tobacco. Right. But when it became, we started putting chemicals in the plants and preservatives, and then cigarettes in there, and then more nicotine. And then it became highly addictive, and then people were getting sick. And is it the plant, or is it all the chemicals and that we were putting into it? Again, this isn't at all a plug for tobacco, but I think we created the enemy.
Yes.
Ourselves. It wasn't tobacco.
Yes.
It's that just unfortunately was the vehicle that was used. But I think that if we can sort of take away some of that judgment, or not put meanings on those things. And you're right, like not everybody. I'm certainly not an advocate that everybody should go to an ayahuasca ceremony. Like that's not at all what I know you're saying and I'm saying. And there's a lot of vehicles, and there's a lot of different plant medicines and in many different cultures all over the world, almost everyone, whether it's, mushrooms or cactus or the vine or, so on and so forth. And there's even It's interesting. And again, a lot of that, even marijuana, right? We've made that, a bad thing. And now it's sort of coming out of that a little bit. And that's been, sort of shape shifting in terms of what it means to certain groups and becoming more socially accepted. But why to be socially unaccepted?
Right.
You're right. There's healing properties to it as well, used in, the appropriate fashion.
Yeah. One of the things I've learned, and it's helped me, I've learned this in ceremony, but it's helped me in my life, is set and setting and intention.
Right.
Like where and what, and then why. It's like, what is my intention here? Like I was saying, my intention was to heal the mother wound, and I got exactly what I needed, not knowing what I wanted wasn't going to lead me there. And plants, I just find I love that I love to talk about plant medicine. I talk about it quite a bit on these podcasts. I think it's important that two men like us can get here, talk about it. We're successful professionally, but almost now as a byproduct of our own healing. Well, I wouldn't say almost, as a byproduct of our own healing, not a prime product of our own grit and intellect, and we're going to grind it out. It's like, no, we heal. The plants helped us heal. And now we're here today helping other people heal in our own modalities.
That's, so it's funny that we started talking about balance, and I didn't mention this earlier, but now might be an appropriate time. So intention, I think and that's what kind of triggered that with me is, whether you do New Year's resolutions or not, or whether you set an intention for at a birthday, how does the next year of your life, whatever the case is. And I've always, I had two intentions this year. The first was balance, and the second was healing. And I say balance and trying to be more intentional with how I spend my energy. Like that was like feeding energy into things that feed it back to me, giving myself when I feel like I get back. And again, whether that's family, friends, work, like trying to keep myself healthy as I'm in balance. And then the other piece of the healing part is continuing. Like to me, I don't know that like it's going to be a long self journey, right? There's parts of me like you feel like you get down the rabbit hole and you're like, oh, there's a trap door. Like I'm going deeper into into this, and then there's more, and then there's other levels of healing. And then to your point, then so the healing for me, everything again, kind of back to balance, has this sort of duality, right? The other part is how do we help others heal? And I know that's part of your calling, why I, went to Wacoa, why I'm at Life Guides now, is how do we, sort of not destigmatize, but I think people like being vulnerable, being able to share all our stories. Mm-hmm. And I know that you and I both get to do this when you can share your story.
Yes.
It gives permission for people to share their story. And once they have permission to share their story, it begins the path of healing. And so that's like the goal here, right? So how do we, recognize, what, like we were I'll speak for myself, like in a really dark spot in my life. But like through friends, yourself, others that were there to help pick me up, that were there to encourage me. There are some guardian angels or spirits or people that show up in saunas and give you words like balance that disappear. They kind of drop in. You don't know who they are, and they drop back out. Like I've had a few of those that are like, wow, that was an amazing like lesson, like that just I was taught, like, and they're gone. Like that's a cool thing.
It is amazing. I really, I've been really digging in as far as like, what is this realm? What is this? I mean, I can feel the energy right now, just the media, the push, the education system, like pushing so hard. I can see in like a matrix style, I can see the agenda of almost everything. And it is all leading us away from balance and self-knowledge and presence and relationship with nature and the ground and the earth and the dirt. And you said gratitude. And in Judaism, the very first prayer upon waking is the Moed Ani, which says, I thank you, O living and eternal King, for returning my soul within me with compassion and loving kindness, for great is your faithfulness. This like concept of like my breath is like, whoa, God, thank you for my breath. Like this is no joke. We're so far away from this push. And there's a saying, I'm no longer a religious person. People say, I have read the Bible so many times that it's just like ingrained in my DNA. However, I love the framework of the Bhagavad Gita or the Quran, or even reading the Satanic Bible last year. I was like, okay, it's just more like your friend wisdom. Or I'm always like, well, what do they know? Or what language set are they using that I don't know? I want to go learn their language set. And so that I can speak and relate. But there's a verse that Jesus said, he said, in my Father's house, there are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. And I'm always like, as growing up, like, what the hell does that mean? Like, we get a mansion in heaven. Like that's cool. Maybe if you're talking to people that are in paupers or whatever, but I'm like, what does it actually mean? And so I'm sitting in meditation and I say, oh, mansion, it's a conjunction word again. There are so many conjunction words in the English language, by the way, anagrams, conjunction words, there's spell casting. They teach us to write in cursive so we can curse, because what we put out into the world manifests. And so they get us to speak a certain language set, which leads this manifestation down this realm that we're like, what the hell is happening? But he says, in my Father's house, there's many mansions. Well, what is mansion? Man Zion. There are many perspectives of what heaven is to you and what heaven is to me. May be the same, may not be the same, but guess what? There's room for it all. And that's what's so beautiful is like, as you heal and you share your story, this gets me back to, you're saying you share your story and it gives permission for other people to share their story and purpose and vision. It's like, wow, if I can see what a Zion, that place of rest, that final state of like beingness is, and you can share yours and we can learn and coexist and create together. Because what did you say anthropology was? What did your professor say?
Said it was the study of likeness or similarities, not of differences.
Dude, it's so cool how this all ties together.
Yeah, no, it does. So a couple things. I love your curiosity. I think like, and I like get curious like about things.
Yeah.
Everybody should be curious. Like I literally like driving to school this morning, like, Daddy, what do worms eat? Daddy. So do they eat dirt? Daddy. What's in the dirt today? I mean, like just deep, like we're like deep into what worms eat this morning driving to school. Awesome. Like that was our conversation. But it just reminded me, like, I love the curiosity. And this, to your other point, like that society's driving us away from some of this. My biggest fear is that society's driving us away from each other.
Yes.
And that at the core of it, like there are really good people in the world. I firmly believe that. I'm not Pollyanna. I'm not this, like, go talk, and you've all heard, go talk to your neighbors, go talk to friends. Like there are people that deeply want to help make the world a better place. I see it every day in the work that I do. And like, that's encouraging. If I, again, just watch the news or read the paper, it's like, we're all fucked. Like this is, not good. And we're polarized now. And like, it's a shame, but we are the same.
Yes.
We do want to love and be loved. And again, like politics, religion, all that stuff that polarizes us. Yes. Like push get curious and be awesome. Like I think it's
yes. It we moved to Texas. So people that listen know this, and I shared. I was living in Seattle, moved from Seattle to Dallas, and I met with a coworker. She's from Seattle. She was in Dallas, and I had coffee with her yesterday. And it was wild, her view of Texas because of politics. She thinks Texans are redneck, bush league. She's big on the abortion stuff and it's driving. She just like, and I said, even in Seattle, when does the government represent the people? I don't know any government in the world that represents the people how we are, because I know going out in the street here, black, white, hardcore Biden, hardcore Trump, Muslim, Hindu to my side, and all of us are outside, all having beers, or not everyone's drinking, but we're having beers, and the kids are playing, and my daughter's catching frogs, and no one gives a shit like about any of this bullshit manufactured division. At the end of the day, this is the beauty of humanity, like right before my eyes. And I was sharing this with her, and I said, I did not get this at all in Seattle, at all. And Seattle has this view of progressivism and like uber progressive. They think they're like beyond, they really think they're like, if holiness can be achieved in the progressive state, they are there. It's like, and I'm like, it's the complete opposite. You look down, and this is not to say one's better than the other. What I am sharing is the media, like you said, it's meant to divide us. These institutions are meant to separate us even further. And it's like, when you go out into the street and you look another human being in the eyes and like, oh, hi, and it's just fascinating. Like my neighbor, I just have to share a story. So this Black family right here, so beautiful. And I mean, just tremendous wisdom and fascinating, like how they grew up. And my neighbor right next door is a self-described redneck, and they call him family and he calls them family. And it's just a beautiful relationship. And politics came up the other day, and I was like, okay, cool. Like, how's this going to roll? And no one got charged. No one got like flared. Everyone had different perspectives. And she goes, Trump, I don't even know. No one was even talking about Trump, but she brought Trump's a racist. And my neighbor goes, how? He was the NAACP man of the year. And she's like, well, that doesn't matter. And I go, wait a minute. Now the NAACP doesn't matter. I'm so confused. And it was funny. We were all like, how did we get to this point where, these data points, everyone holds on to them. And then like, and I was like, wait a minute. Now we're saying things matter and don't matter versus reality and not reality. And it was funny because we all kind of took a step back, like, yeah, this is all ridiculous. It is. It's all ridiculous.
And I felt the best way to bridge that gap, and that's always what you guys are doing, is through food, right?
Yes.
Like it's the shared, and we did this with my group in college. We would all have a potluck, and I come from a very Sicilian family, and I would bring, I was the crazy Italian Sicilian. We had others, and we would all bring a dish from our upbringing, and it was just like everything else went out the window and people just smiled, right? They start talking about the food and their favorite dishes and growing up and their love of this and the smell of their grandma's, cooking or whatever. And it just like, that transcends all of it, right? It cuts through all the rest of the bullshit. Yes. And it's like, now we're back to being people again, which is what we need to do more of, and invite the neighbors over and learn the dishes of all of that. And I think that's, I love that you have that diversity in your neighborhood and that you can see firsthand. And again, back to kind of program, we've somehow like allowed ourselves, to be programmed if we just like stop for a second and just create some separation, be like, okay, what's real, what's not?
That's right. And what brings balance and what doesn't bring balance? Eating together with intention to love one another brings balance.
It does. There's, I've gone to a couple, various ceremonies, and they treat food, as it really is, right? As a gift, and there's blessings that are, over the food as you're eating the food. And again, these are practices that it's not a religious thing that like you give honor to whatever you're eating and gratitude to whoever cooked it for you, and take a minute and, and again, whether you call that prayer, whether you call it a gratitude moment, whether you call it whatever, like, I think it's like, those are the things that like, I think bring harmony back into what we do and a reminder. And I know we're all living really busy lives, but those are like the little things that I try to like bring back to my girls. And I'm a single dad, and I get it. Like, it's hard, and I'm running sometimes, and sometimes I don't have time to sit down and eat, but I'll sit down for the first 3 minutes for the gratitude moments, you know what I mean? At a minimum, just to get that. But like, I think those are the types of things that can bring balance back into our day. And just these little micro moments. So I need micro moments, like just to have those things to latch onto, to hopefully give hope again and teach our kids. I think it's the same way, like, let's just slow down and love each other and acknowledge that and open to that. And I think that's the other word that is fascinating that has gotten lost, I think, between us. And if I were to say, look, Lucas, I love you, brother, like, be like, well, you like crossing the line there, bro? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is that too much? And like, is that too much? Or to bring it into an organizational setting, and like, look, like, that's cool. You can love at your house, but please don't love at the office. Kind of thing. Right. But it's core, right? Like, I do love you, and I'm so glad we met, and I will carry that love for you. And you know that you've got a brother with me. And like, I think if we could just bring more of that too, like, I don't know, we could be off to the races.
I do. And I believe I don't know this. I want to keep this on track, but I don't even know what track we're on, so it doesn't matter. But I
just professed my love to you. So,
and I love you too, brother. And it is so beautiful. It is so beautiful to be able to receive. I learned this at a ayahuasca ceremony. My wife told me that we have been through this massive healing journey together. And like 2 years into this journey, 3 years into this journey, she looked at me and she's like, and I used to say Gary, what's the 5 love languages guy?
Oh, I know you're talking about it.
Chapman, or I forget the guy who wrote the 5 love languages.
Block that out. That's a different story, but go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, totally. But I used to say my love language is words of affirmation and physical touch. And I have a different perspective now on words of affirmation. I think words of affirmation are the wounded masculine that men need to be told they're good. And my wife was telling me on the medicine, she's like, you're like a bathtub with no plug in the drain, and I can fill it up and it just drains, right? I fill it up and it just drains. And she's telling me this, and I saw this deep wound in her eyes. Like, she's talking to me, I'm looking at her, but I saw that there is like a soul. I have soul wounded her. And I'm looking at her like, because I have not received her love, I have caused rejection, that her love was not enough. And rejection always leads to resentment. And I saw this pattern. And the reason why I could not receive love, like if you say I love you, I'm like, I love you too, or real quick, like, I love you too, but to like you really let that land, like, no, I received that and I love you too. Like there is no like energy of like there's no buzz, and I always feel the buzz, like there's no buzz. I'm like really receive that. Prior to that night, the people that were closest to me growing up, I was afraid were going to kill me. Always. Up until I gave my TED talk, I was afraid that my dad would take my life. So I had to look at that. It's like, even if I would back down my ego to 0.01%, there was still a sheath over my heart. And that sheath she was telling me, it's not, you're not receiving my love. So I finally had to come to this place in this plant medicine to say, am I willing to die to receive her love? And I said, yes. And what I learned from this night has radically changed my life. In Hebrew, the word for love is ahava. So every time the word love is written in the Torah, it's the word ahava, which means to give. So love always gives. But what I learned that night is the greatest act of love I can give is to receive, which is why food, it's this giving and receive. It's like the greatest act of love we can give one another is to prepare food and to receive food and be with each other. It's incredible.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. That's really a beautiful story. And it's just like, again, back to like, it's funny, like I know you and I didn't prep for this. So like balance feels like it's been sort of the theme here. You can't really give until you can learn to receive. And like, it's both. It's back to balancing.
And receiving is giving. That's like, for me, I'm still mind blown by that concept. Right. Receiving's giving. So weird. Life is funny, isn't it, man? It's funny.
It is. Yeah. This is great. I don't even know. Like, I feel like, yeah.
I've taken us to the cliff to say.
No, the cliff. That's like the perfect. I think that's the lesson, right? Like, how do we, do that in everything that we touch? And the last thing that like everything that we do, every interaction that we have has unintended, impacts. Mm-hmm. And I try to say, whether you're talking on a Zoom and you're not smiling, that might mean something. Whether you're smiling a lot, whether you say like all of these little things, I've watched, and we live in this virtual world now, right? Where I think it's harder because it's so much of this. Like, I wish I was sitting there with you because I would have hugged you like 4 times now. Yeah. You know what I mean? I can't. So we're not like there with 2 microphones, like having our own like human to human. But I think, I think it's just bringing more intentionality to how we show up. And if we can bring little, nuggets of love or gratitude or try to make someone smile. And we've always said, you don't know what happens on the other side of the computer. You know what happens when I shut my camera off and my thing off and I walk into the other room, right. What I'm dealing with. And I think, the world needs just more, whatever we can do, like let's give it a little bit extra than we would have to wave to a neighbor, to say you love somebody, to check in on a friend you haven't talked to for a while and just say, how you doing? One of the saddest stories I heard was a friend of mine. She said, I think I'm ready to quit my job. And I said, well, why? She said, you know what? She goes, my boss has never asked me how I'm doing. And I was like, wow, like that sucks. But that little thing is really profound, right? How you doing? Like, yeah. So I don't know, man. I'm so grateful to be able to have these conversations with you. And I know this is going to be like the first of many. I feel like like build on this and see where the next one lands. And I would love to get any comments or feedback from anybody that's watched this and where we should head next, because I know there's a lot more to unpack and discover with each other, and hopefully continue to sort of raise vibration or get people permission to tell stories or join us on the journey or whatever.
Yes, I love it, brother. Before I let you go, Life Guides is an important company. I think this is really important. And I really love, I just wanted to say this earlier, is the word guide. There's so much humility in that. It's not like life coach or life president or king, whatever this higher, it's this guide. It's this side. And I really love that. And can you share I know we're going to wrap here in a little bit, but just share what Life Guides is and what you're doing.
The spirit of what Life Guides is connecting someone that's going through a life event with someone that's successfully navigated that. In my own life, back to my mother, I remember my dad fighting with health insurance companies and could have used the wisdom or perspective from someone that maybe was there before. If you've ever had a loved one that, unfortunately had cancer or something else, and you become an expert, in parts of life that you never wanted to be, and talking to someone that can their empathy and wisdom as to what they went through it, can be helpful. And in my own life, it was whether it be with my sister or going through a divorce or being a single dad. And, or, when I was a young CEO and, I was forced to have, a coach. It wasn't called a guide at that point, but not everybody has, have that. And so Life Guides was, created about 6 years ago. And one of our founders actually founded Match.com. And so the idea is, instead of love and romance, it's around shared life experiences. And so when I heard about him, I was going through my divorce, and I raised my hand and I told our CEO, I said, I want to be a guide. And that was it. Like, that was the motivation. I just wanted to start to help other people do that. And I know you and many of you, watchers, listeners, whatever, have been guides or mentors or friends or neighbors or, whatever, answering questions about kids or parents or whatever. And so that's what we do. So if your organization is looking for something awesome to help people navigate the twists and turns, we're here to help.
Love it. It's beautiful. You're a beautiful man, brother. I'm thankful for you. Dude, thank you. I can't wait for our next one. And then with the journey in person together, that's going to be a beautiful time.
Likewise. And so, I do my own called Humanize, and I look forward to having you a guest, on mine, and we can share and continue to build on the momentum. But thank you for the opportunity. And thank everybody for giving us the time and to listening and to opening your heart to, being with us today. So we appreciate it.
Well, brother Ryan, thank you again. Thank you for doing the work. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being a beautiful example of masculine energy in beautiful alignment with feminine energy, and to be vulnerable and show up and share. I'm so honored that you came on. Thank you. And everyone listening, there's no better time to heal. There's no better time to really dig into the work than there is right now. And if you're a man and you're listening to this and it speaks to you, if you know a man that needs to do the work, I'm launching the Dawn of Masculinity with Johnny L. Sasser, who I've had on the podcast. And it's a 12-week course where we walk through with coaching calls and content and guest speakers, really helping and walking alongside men to become the own hero in their life, to become the king, to become the gardener, to become the warrior, to step in fully to presence and face those fears, face the traumas, and become just a beautiful man, example like by Ryan. So if you're interested, make sure you message me and I'll give you all the details for that course. We are those light workers. We are the beings here to help the world heal. Remember, hurt people, but healthy people heal people. And we are all on this journey together to heal. And it's beautiful. And you're not alone. You've never been alone. And it's time for all of us to step into this. So thank you again, Ryan, for coming on. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I bless you all. I'm Lucas Mack. This is the Golden Rule Revolution, and I'll talk to you on the next episode. Thank you, brothers and sisters, for listening. For support in your journey, go to my website, lucasmack.com.